Hello everyone and welcome to the Pearson Ham Quarterly Pet Insurance webinar. This is for Q4 2024, so taking a look at the pet insurance industry in the last 3 months and over the course of 2024. I'll go through here some of the things that we usually go through for some of the people who've attended this webinar before. We'll take a look at some trends in the industry, any news articles that have come up in the last quarter, and of course, as always, there are Q&A at the end, so do feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go through as well, and I'll address any that come up. Excellent. So I'll kick off then. So first, for those of you who aren't familiar with Pearson Ham, so we are a pricing consultancy. So we're based in London, but we also have offices in Paris and Barcelona. Our data and everything that we'll be talking about in the pack today is collected using dummy quotes that we run through the price comparison websites for different types of insurance. So that will be sort of motor, home, pet, van, and travel are the types of insurance that we track. So the data is collected by running profiles through the comparison sites. We then collect the prices from that, and from that, obviously, we can track trends in the market, any sort of new products that are arriving, and footprints of existing products that consumers are buying. And being a pricing consultancy, obviously, we are well positioned to understand what is a genuine pricing trend in the market. So we also apply to the data we collect, we apply critical thinking, data cleansing, so that you can filter out any sort of erroneous data and generate sort of key metrics from the massive data that we're collecting from the comparison sites. So as I say, we're currently price tracking on 5 kinds of insurance. This one will be covering pet insurance. If you're interested in car or home, those run on a separate cycle with my colleague Stephen Kennedy for car and home, or also quarterly webinars. And of course, as usual, the profiles that we do run are always real people. We are always running real profiles through the comparison sites, no matter what type of insurance we are collecting for. This means that the prices we're getting back will be passing credit checks and will be following genuine price trends. It's not dummy data. And the data we collect is always with consent of the websites. So we're always with agreement with comparison sites to collect data. Excellent. If we move into some of the pricing trends that we've seen in pet insurance in the last quarter. So from October through to December 2024, overall, we're seeing big decreases actually in the quarter after sort of tentative uplifts over the summer. So -4% decrease we see in top 5 prices over that period. Almost all of that decrease is coming from that 1 month in November, so 4.5% coming out in November, and that's in contrast to the adjacent months in October and December, where we see sort of tentative increases. Now, if we line that trend up, like I say, with what we've seen for the rest of the year, so that decrease in November is the biggest that we've seen in the last 12 months. So it's more than nearly double what we saw in March with that other decrease there. Other months during the year, though, like I said, we've had tentative increases all the way through the summer, but I'm afraid this 4.5% decrease in November essentially cancels that out. So in fact, top 5 prices for pet insurance are actually down on the starting point that we began with in January 2024. So about 2% decrease overall for pet insurance over the year. And then splitting out some of those segments. So the previous chart is based on the most basic level of cover. So starting from any cover level from 1K worth of vet fee cover limits upwards. If we split that out into higher customer segments, so customers wanting cover from 2K, 3K or more for lifetime cover, we can see that the more recent trends are fairly universal across all cover types. So that decrease in November was fairly universal, whether you're sort of looking at the lowest level of cover up to 5K or more vet fee cover limit. For the shape of the year, though, it does mean that there's a bit of a split out towards the end of the year. So actually some of those higher cover levels, so sort of 4K, 5K or more, are ending the year on a positive. Cover for 5K or more is actually up by about 4% year on year, whereas as you saw on the previous slide, it's that lowest level also sort of contributing from that decrease in March. That means that they are down year on year. And like I say, everything on that slide is lifetime cover. If we're looking at alternative types of pet insurance, we're seeing a slightly different story there. So max benefit, time limited pet cover has been steadily increasing throughout the year. So we've not seen so much downward pressure on the alternate cover types for pet insurance. So both of those are up by about 13% year on year. And then looking down into profile segments. So if we were to look at those changes, again, back to lifetime 1K cover, splitting that out into different animal segments. So if we're looking by age group, for example, there's a bit of a difference there. Decreases are strongest on older animals, so sort of animals aged over 6 years old. And actually sort of for the middle of the range, sort of for animals that are under 1 or aged 1 to 3, are seeing less of a downturn. In fact, animals aged 1 to 3 are basically net with the start of the year. So that the decreases in November also impacted all age groups, but over the course of 12 months, we're seeing there's a slight split out there, about 4 percentage points difference between the higher and lower age groups. And then also between cats and dogs as well. Again, I think sort of a lot of this split between the two lines occurred maybe earlier in the year, around about March, where we see dogs dipping down slightly below cats on a long-term index. Again, the decreases in November impacted both cats and dogs likewise, but it means that over a 12-month period, we're seeing insurance premiums for cats are up slightly by about 2%, whereas dogs have decreased by about a similar, about a minus 3% for dogs. So we're seeing more downward pressure for dogs than cats. And again, between animal types as well. So actually sort of contrasting to some of the previous slides, we've seen animal breeds generally moving in line with each other for the best part of the year, actually. So pricing for crossbreeds, for sort of mixed breeds, so that would be moggies and mongrels, and then pedigrees have generally been moving in line. It's really only in the last quarter actually that we've seen those split out slightly. So that top line there is crossbreed animals, so less of a decrease in November and more of an uplift in December, whereas it's mixed breeds, it's the mongrels and moggies that have had the most of the downward pressure, so down by about 3% year on year. And then splitting out by region as well. So this is one that stands out quite a lot, actually, when you look at it over a 12-month period, you get to the end of the year. So sort of hived off at the top as outliers, essentially, is Scotland and Northern Ireland, who are up slightly, or yes, even with the start of January, whereas down at the bottom, more closely grouped together, is England and Wales, with the lowest, sort of the largest amount of decrease coming to profiles in London. So the sort of the rate of decrease has been strongest on England, and particularly London, whereas policyholders in Scotland and Northern Ireland have seen less downward pressure in their pet insurance premiums. Brilliant. So then if we take a look into what kind of brands that we're seeing behind some of these price changes, obviously all these price changes you see will be product driven to some degree or another. There will be different providers changing their prices, and that are resulting in these different segmentations that we're seeing. So for this webinar, we've anonymized the insurers, but you can follow the trend at least, or at least take a guess at who each of these insurers are. So this is looking at this board, looking at which brands most frequently appear in the top 6 rows on the price comparison sites for pet insurance at each cover level. So, for example, of all the profiles that we ran on the comparison sites, 94% of the results pages we collected had insurer 1 somewhere in them. So that's almost universal. It's a rare day when you don't see insurer 1 appearing somewhere in the top 6 ranks when you're starting from 1K cover onwards. Below that, sort of closely matching as well, is insurer 2. Both of which have taken quite a significant amount of premium out during the year. So their premiums are down sort of between 10 and 15% versus the start of the year. But their market share, or at least their ranking in that market share, is quite even with where they were at the start of the year. So their rank is unchanged. So if we were looking at this leaderboard for January 2024, it would be the same 2 insurers appearing at the top. Down below there, it's quite a thin amount of share left for other insurers in the market. So the next largest share is 26%. So 26% of the time, you've got insurer 3 appearing in the top 6 ranks of a results page. But you can see that a few of these, with their year-to-date change in rank, shows that they have gained market share since the start of the year. So insurer 3, insurer 5, insurer 8 wasn't anywhere within the top 6 at all at the start of the year, which is why it's sort of a hash and nay. So that 14% that they've gained during the year has essentially come up from nothing. And then if we move up a cover level, so if you're looking at cover starting from £2,000 or more, so we've got the same sort of anonymized names, but in a different order. Insurer 1 is still at the top here, but their market share is slightly diluted. In fact, they have gained share since the start of the year, so they've moved up 1 rank compared to 12 months ago. But you've got some other brands appearing in this top 15 here as well that clearly don't rate so highly for 1K cover, but are more competitive at the higher levels. And again, you've got a fair few brands here that have gained market share since the start of the year. So big increase in ranks versus January 2024. Meanwhile, insurer 17 was the largest share at the start of the year. They've dropped 3 ranks now into 4th. And again, casting your eye down this year-to-date price movement, I mean, we're not surprised, I think, to see that the top 5 prices have decreased year on year, when you can see a lot of those big insurers are taking double digits out in rates over the last 12 months. And again, insurer 1 at the top here, followed by insurer 17. So again, nearly more than double actually the market share from 1 down to the second ranked product. And then the insurer that is this one here, so sort of previously ranked, was previously ranked 1 at the start of the year. Again, if we're looking at the rank change there, so they've lost 5 positions, that puts them in 6th. So again, this insurer had quite a significant market share 12 months ago, but have lost out. So you can see there's been a fair amount of movement over the course of the year. There we are. And then from 4K or more, moving up another cover level. This is still insurer 1 at the top, but this is the lowest amount of share out of any of the sort of the 5 cover levels that we track. So 67% of the time they're appearing somewhere in the top 6. So they're sort of quite closely followed actually by insurer 2 in this example, who have moved up 7 ranks since the start of the year. Again, still plenty of decreases. The top 3 rows here we're seeing have taken nearly 15% out at this cover level, and plenty of other insurers here as well that just didn't rate at the start of the year. And then at the highest level of cover, so cover starting from 5,000 or more, so the brand now ranked in 15 has dropped 13 places. So again, there's another one here who had quite a significant share at the start of the year and have dropped out, and you've got others moving into that space. So insurer 2, where nowhere near the top of this a year ago. They've moved up 13 ranks, so they've really gained a lot of share. They previously weren't competitive at this price level, so they've, while they're sort of quite significantly competitive, we've seen insurer to, I think, somewhere in this top 15 for pretty much every cover level that we've covered so far. I think a year ago they weren't very competitive on 5K, but they have moved into that space now as well. Brilliant. And then moving on to market news that we've had in the last quarter as well. So it's been a fairly quiet period for sort of big innovations in the market over the Christmas period, I think. But over that time, we did see Which announcing its leading pet insurance providers for 2025. So overall, best pet insurance overall they awarded to Agria. You've got some other brands there as well. Best cat insurance for every paw, best pre-existing condition for many pets, and there's a few other there, Pet Plan, Kennel Club, which aren't on the comparison sites, so they're not in our tracking. So which were generally scoring high for overall customer satisfaction, and also on the rate that they pay out for claims. So I think sort of the market average being sort of 95% of claims paid out. There were some quite large brands, so I think Admiral, Waggle as well, were marked down in their rankings for the reason that they pay out less frequently on claims than some of those other brands, and Agria as well. So this is something tying in with general trends I think we've seen in the pet insurance industry. I think last webinar we touched on the fact that the number of people, number of consumers that are taking out pet insurance is higher than ever before, according to the ABI. So this will be something I think that is probably increasingly important to pet insurers going forward, is the customer reputation. It's now becoming more of a mainstream thing to get insurance for your pet, especially as we're seeing sort of a lot of those animals that were bought during lockdown are now aging up as well. So customers are going to be searching around. The market is growing, so one of the things that insurers can really do to catch a consumer's eye is to do well in these sorts of industry rankings. And then speaking of Agria as well, again over that time period we've also seen Agria in the news by pairing up with a company Quanti, who are an insurtech firm. So they are sort of developing pricing software that's going to enhance Agria's pricing ability. So there's more sophistication. I think sort of in the past, pet insurance has been a little bit simple in its calculations for pricing compared to some of the complexity that goes into other insurance types like home and motor. So we know sort of plenty of insurers don't run credit checks or sort of involve the same degree of sophistication into pricing. So this sort of team up between Agria and Quanti sort of signifies that they are, I guess, exploring more sophisticated methods of pricing for pet insurance. And this is something that is, again, touching on the previous slide, going to matter to consumers and to matter to insurers as well. If we've got sort of price sensitivity in the market, we've got increasing cost pressures, sort of cost of claims coming from the vet industry. So sort of the cost of claims has just been increasing and increasing over time. We know the CMA are looking into the vet industry to understand sort of the reason behind the inflating costs there. But to be able to balance that, so the increasing cost of claims for insurers with sort of more customer awareness about what's out there in the market for pet insurance, I think there's going to be more need really for more sophisticated pricing tools in pet than have previously been used. Excellent. I think that brings us to the end of the slides. Let me check in and see if there have been any questions dropped into the chat. None so far. I'll review just a few that have come through separately, just questions about the pet insurance industry. So we had one earlier on in the week, questions about challenges. What challenges do we anticipate for the pet insurance industry in 2025. So we've touched on a few points there, sort of trends that have been building up over 2024 and I think are going to continue into the next year. So obviously I did mention the CMA investigation into veterinary pricing that is ongoing. So I think we did see just under a year ago, it was around about March, if you can remember that 12-month index in our pricing, you could see that premiums dropped off in March, and that was at the time that the CMA announced their investigation. So there is a link up between the price of premiums in pet insurance and what is going on in the veterinary industry. So I think that is slated to continue possibly until the end of this year. I think last webinar we had a timeline outlining exactly when that's going to wrap up. So we sort of possibly be hearing more of that over the next couple of months. So I think that's going to be having an impact on the pet insurance industry. And likewise, some of those points I touched on as well. So sort of the growing demand for pet insurance from consumers, particularly as we see that sort of larger cohort of lockdown pets are aging up, as well as sort of growing awareness of pet insurance. I think I actually saw a TV advert for pet insurance the other day, which I don't think I've ever seen before. So I think there will be more consumer awareness of pets, which leads, as I say, to probably more need for greater sophistication in pricing. And then I'll just finish up with, if there's no other questions in the chat, just one other question that we had raised actually from a client actually earlier in the month, whether we've seen any changes, any sort of deliberate changes from providers in the cover levels that they're providing, or the structure of their cover to pet insurance. If we've seen much of that over the last year, we have seen a few examples. We did see one insurance provider, a fairly large one, make some changes to their product. Again, that contributed to the price increases that we see in November, which was a bit of a balancing act between sort of a vet fee excess and the pricing. So we see one major insurer, their premiums dropped significantly, but the copay on the pet insurance increased by quite a significant amount. So again, if you're getting increased price sensitivity from customers, then perhaps certainly we've seen some insurers leaning more on increasing the copay, increasing the excess amount to balance out lower premiums to begin with. But other than that, I'm surprised to see so many products in the market still at such low cover levels. So I mean, you saw there are still plenty of brands offering vet fee cover from 1K, which again, as veterinary care gets more and more expensive, I think we've had called out before, does that really cover much at a vet clinic these days? But we haven't seen any insurers pulling back from that price point. We're still seeing sort of plenty of offerings starting at a very low level. So it looks as though any kind of inflation in vet fees doesn't seem to be having an impact on product offerings just yet. Excellent. Well, if there's no more questions, I'll leave it there. Do reach out if you do have any other questions, or if there's anything that comes to mind after the webinar is over. Feel free to reach out to me or Stephen Kevendy. We'll be happy to deal with your inquiry. But if there's nothing more, I will leave it there and hopefully see you again in 3 months' time for the next pet webinar.